Alright guys, welcome back to another video on this watch cabinet. The first video was about breaking down the rough lumber. As you can see, I got a little further than I wanted to before posting another in-depth video, but that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. Time crunches and all that. But I'm here right before the glue up and I want to talk about pre-finishing. So let's go into detail about what is involved with pre-finishing, what I like to use, should you do it, and what are the benefits and non-benefits. Alright, let's go. Alright, so at this point in the build, I have all of my cabinet parts for the first glue up, and I have the inside faces sanded to 220, and I've also tried to wipe the dust off using just a shop towel. You could use a tack cloth, but a shop towel works just fine as well. The finish I'm going to be using is Shellac. This is straight from Home Depot. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on most places. This is a pretty reliable brand as far as pre-mixed shellac is concerned. And what we're going to do is we're going to dilute it with alcohol. Alcohol is the solvent in shellac, so if you add alcohol to it, it makes it thinner, which also makes it easier to apply. If you go straight from the can, it's going to be okay, but it's going to be a little gummy in my opinion, especially if you don't work fast enough. So we're going to put it into a bottle like this, which I'll have linked below. These are nice because they have the measurements labeled on there so you can get the right mixture. Not that the mixture is super important, but if you want to be exact, this is helpful for that. So I want to talk about the pros and cons of pre-finishing. Now, the pros are obviously that you don't have to worry about finishing later on, especially the inside faces. It's difficult to reach into those corners sometimes. You're not going to get great results. Even if you are spraying your finish, you can get into the corners, but you might get some drips into that corner where everything just sort of meets in that corner. Overall, it's less stressful to just get that done ahead of time. You don't have to worry about it later. Now, some of the reasons I won't pre-finish a project is that I don't have the finish on hand and I don't have the time to do it. Another bad thing about pre-finishing is if you don't have space to lay all your parts out to dry, then it's going to be kind of difficult, or you have to do things in stages. Now, this project isn't that big, so I can pre-finish this face, and this one, and just kind of spread them out on my workbench. But on some of my larger apothecary chests, I have tons and tons of parts, and pre-finishing all those faces and laying them around the shop, it kind of puts you out of commission for the rest of the day. So you either have to plan to do it at the end of the day, or just kind of realize that you're not going to be able to create dust while that finish is drying. So let's get started and see what is involved with making this shellac here. So for a long time, I would just use this shellac, go straight from the can and wipe it on. And the results are okay, but like I mentioned, it's a little thicker than you want it to be. And if you thin it out with some alcohol, you can get better results. It'll dry quicker, and then you can add your second or third coat much faster as well. So what I did was I bought some of these bottles on Amazon. I'll link them below. And I'll just make a new bottle for you just to kind of show how I do it. You can use these for glue as well, or ketchup. So what I'm going to do is just take the can, open it up, and kind of mix it up a little bit just to get everything all in one homogeneous mixture here. And I'm just going to do a 50-50 mix of the shellac and the alcohol. So since I already have one made, I'm just going to go ahead and put 2 ounces of the shellac. And you don't have to be super precise, so there's 1 ounce and 2 ounces. Then I'll pop open the alcohol, and this doesn't pour perfectly, but let's see what we got here. Okay, that's pretty good. A little over 50, maybe 55, 45, it's not a big deal. And then you put this on and you're good to go. Now, like I said, adding the alcohol makes this dry much quicker, which means you can go faster, you can put a thinner coat on there, and it just looks cleaner overall. So let's next talk about how we're going to apply this shellac. For a long time, I would use these blue shop towels to apply shellac, and it works nicely. The only thing is once you get to semi-large projects, even just medium-sized ones, this will start to tear and start fraying and getting into your finish, and it's just not going to look good overall. You have more cleanup to do, and so there's better options out there, and that is to use some sort of cotton rag or t-shirt. I ran out of locally grown t-shirts for my dresser, so I purchased just a bag of old white t-shirts, and they just come in little torn pieces. This piece right here I'll use for the internal portion of the pad, and then this is a larger piece that I can cut the external portion from. So what you're going to do is just sort of roll this up like this, and you can be more precise about how you do this, but in the end, you really just want something to apply your finish with smoothly. So I'll take my big oversized scissors here and cut the external portion of it. And I'll just take this wad here and I'll put it in here and twist it up. And there you go. All right, so we have everything sanded up to 220. We wiped off the dust. Now the last thing to do before actually putting the finish on here is to mask off any surfaces that will get glue. So the dados I'm not going to mask off because I'll just be careful and not get finish into the dado. But over where the dowels are or the ends of a board that go in the dado, I'm going to have to mask off just so that we don't get any finish on there. For these ones with the dowels, I just eyeball it. You could put your piece here and mark it with a knife or something, but I'm just going to put tape slightly inside of the dowel here, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so. And for me, that works well enough. So I'll flip this over and do the next side. Now this is another negative of doing pre-finishing, is having to mask off, because first off, blue tape isn't always cheap, and second, it just takes a little bit of time, especially if you have a lot of parts. Now I'll take, this is one of my vertical dividers that has the haunch, not necessarily a tenon because it's full width, but anyways, I'll put the tape at the start of the haunch here and just put it across. So this one is about 3/16 inch high, and this one on this side is only an 1/8 inch, so I'll be kind of careful that I don't go too high because I don't want there to be any bare spots right above that dado. So you got to do both sides of these. Like I said, this takes a little bit of time. The results are worth it, but it is a negative to pre-finishing. So I'll go ahead and get the rest of these done, put them in the oven, and get started with the finish. All right, I'm pretty much ready to go and apply some finish. You'll see if you let the shellac sit for any amount of time, it'll start to separate, so I just kind of swirl it around a little bit, mix it up, take the top off. We'll just start applying it to this pad here and charge it up, and it can hold a good amount. You don't have to like saturate it fully, but do as much as you want and kind of get a feel for it. So after I've done that, I'll just start doing smooth strokes, not trying to press too hard, just kind of letting the finish absorb into the wood here. And you can see how quick it goes. It's a very thin coat, and it's already starting to dry very fast. So by the time you get done with all your parts, you can just keep going and apply your second and possibly third coat. Now for the internal faces of like where the drawers are, especially for my apothecary chest, I'm pretty satisfied with just one coat. But for an internal face that will be seen, I want to go with at least 2 coats, if not 3, and start building a sheen and see what works for you. It's all personal preference, but I would definitely go with at least 2 coats for internal faces that will be seen. So now that this face is done, I'll move on to the next one. I'll go take this one over to the drying station, which is just my table saw. I put some pine sticks down on the table saw, and I can just put the boards here as I finish and let them dry, and I'll move on to the next ones. I'll take this next board, I'll add some more shellac here. And you can just add more shellac as you see fit. You'll kind of get a feel for it and see how the finish is applying. If it starts getting a little less saturated on the board than you want, just apply some more to your pad. Now a porous wood like walnut is going to be a little bit more thirsty than some other woods, and you'll see some of the pores maybe not getting quite as filled as you want. You can press a little harder into those and get the shellac to absorb into them, or you can just wait till your next coat and fill them then. Either way will work just fine. Now this board here is my horizontal divider, so it needs finish on both sides. So what I'm going to do is finish the side that needs 2 coats first. That way I can do the other side that only needs 1 coat, and then come back and do this face a second time. This is just a clear or a blonde shellac. You can get the shellacs with an amber tint to it if you want a richer color on your wood here. I would definitely use this blonde shellac on light color woods, and then it's just a toss up on dark woods like walnut and you know, even cherry. You might want to consider an amber one if you want that look. I'll set this aside and I'll do the other side in a couple minutes, and then I'll go put it on the drying rack. I have a little cut on my finger here, and I'm not wearing gloves, so the alcohol definitely burns a little bit on that, but I guess gloves are always possible, especially if you don't want your hands to be sticky afterwards, because the shellac can get a little sticky when it dries. Now, like I said, this dries super quick. So this piece that I just did right here, it's pretty much essentially dry. I wouldn't necessarily recoat it this quick, but it's dry to the touch, and I wouldn't really be worried about any dust getting stuck in the finish at this point. That's how quick it is, especially when you dilute it. Now, if you buy shellac flakes, you can control the dilution of those flakes just the same as you can with the pre-mixed, but you probably will get a higher quality shellac than you would just straight from a can. Now, these recesses here I'm finishing are to hold undermount lights, and they're just going to be held in place with double-sided tape, which will be attached to some metal plates, and then those metal plates will attach to the lights via the magnets that are built in. I'm not really concerned about the double-sided tape adhering to the finished wood. I think it'll be just fine. I've done it in the past with ring boxes and things like that. It should work out just fine. All right, so this is pretty much the last piece in the first set. So I'll go ahead and set this aside, and then I'll start moving on back to the first piece and add my second coat. All right, I just got 2 coats applied to all of the faces that need multiple coats. Like I said, some of the internal faces in the drawer cabinet, I'll just give 1 coat because that's good enough. But you can see here, it's super smooth. When I rub it, it just sounds like wood. There's no roughness to this. If you do get a little bit of roughness, just hit it with some 220 or 320 paper very lightly, and then again, wipe the dust off and then apply your next coats. But this is 2 coats and it looks really good. I'm probably gonna add a 3rd coat and then I'll call it good. All right, so here comes the 3rd coat. It's starting to build up a little bit of a sheen. I don't want this to be super shiny. I think by the time this 3rd coat is all done and cured, it should be exactly what I want. Just about at that satin finish. I think doing just 1 coat will get you sort of that flat matte look. 2 coats will kind of straddle the flat and satin, and then that 3rd one will definitely bring you into the satin look. I've never really gone further than that. I don't really see the need to go into a semi-gloss look, and I definitely don't want to go into a gloss look. I forgot to mention that what I like to use instead of shellac in certain situations is a water-based polyurethane. Oftentimes for larger projects, I prefer to use a flat or matte water-based poly, and I'll roll that on with a foam roller, and it's just much easier to apply to a larger surface area as opposed to wiping it on with this method. I would try to stick to a similar application pattern, whether you do short sections or just do long strokes along the whole length of a piece. Try to stay consistent so that you can get an idea of where you've applied finish. When you do that first coat, you can definitely see where you haven't applied finish, but on the 2nd and 3rd coats, it's not quite as easy to see where you have finish and where you don't have finish. So try to stay consistent so you don't miss any spots. All right, so that's about it for pre-finishing a cabinet. Like I said, there are a lot of pros to doing it. There are a few cons, such as not having the time to do it, not having the finish on hand, masking things off, things of that nature. But overall, I try to do it as much as possible because it does save you in the end when time is maybe a little bit more important. So be on the lookout for some more videos pertaining to this project, and then eventually when it's done, I will have the full build video out, which will be its typical parillaworks video. So until next time, thank you guys for watching.